Did you know that 1969 was the year prog rock was born in the shadows, far from the spotlight that shone on Abbey Road and Let It Bleed? While the world was captivated by the Beatles crossing that iconic zebra crossing, or Mick Jagger strutting at Altamont, something extraordinary was brewing in dimly lit basements and studios across Europe and North America. Bands you've likely never heard of were crafting sounds that would make Yes, Genesis, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer seem tame years later. The official history of progressive rock often begins with King Crimson's In the Court of the Crimson King, released that same year. But this convenient narrative overlooks a constellation of albums that never got the recognition they deserved, works that pioneered musical elements credited to others a decade later. What's fascinating about 1969 is that it was a year when anything seemed possible in music. The counterculture was still breathing its final gasps of pre-Altamont idealism. Recording studios had become sonic laboratories, with 8 and 16-track equipment becoming more accessible, and a generation of conservatory-trained musicians, passionate about rock and roll, found the courage to blend Bach with blues, jazz with psychedelia, and musique concrète with distorted guitars. But the music industry, that relentless machine turning art into commerce, didn't quite know what to do with these experiments. Labels threw meager budgets at experimental bands, hoping to stumble upon the next Pink Floyd, only to abandon the resulting albums when they proved too complex for AM radio. This was a pivotal era of transition. The psychedelia of the 1960s was evolving into more structured forms, influenced by European classical music and American jazz. Musicians like Robert Fripp and Keith Emerson were just starting out, but lesser-known bands were already pushing boundaries with radical experiments. Multi-track tape technology enabled sonic layers previously reserved for symphony orchestras, yet radio and TV still favored short, danceable singles, leaving conceptual albums in commercial limbo. The economic landscape of the 1969 music industry was particularly hostile to innovators. Major labels like EMI and Decca dominated, while smaller subsidiaries took risks on experimental acts with little marketing muscle. Festivals like Woodstock stole the global spotlight, but prog bands played to niche crowds in underground clubs. This disconnect between creation and consumption created a chasm. Albums were recorded with raw passion but distributed poorly, often limited to initial pressings of a few thousand copies. Critics at Melody Maker or Rolling Stone occasionally championed these gems, but with little impact on sales. Today, thanks to streaming, vinyl reissues, and online communities like Prog Archives, these records are resurfacing, influencing modern indie and prog metal artists. They not only capture the bold spirit of 1969, but also reveal deep connections to the progressive rock of the 1970s, from jazz fusions to dense psychedelic textures. Talking about obscure 1969 prog rock albums means diving into a parallel universe of music history, where technical skill and artistic ambition didn't always translate to commercial success. These records flopped not because they were bad, but because they were too good, too complex, too challenging for a public still swaying to the Archie's Sugar. Their obscurity tells us as much about the limitations of the music market as it does about the creative courage of their makers. To set the stage, 1969 saw dozens of experimental rock albums released across Europe and the US, but only a handful entered the official canon. These bands paved the way for German krautrock and the British Canterbury sound, with influences echoing in artists like Tool or Porcupine Tree, as discussed in specialized forums and historical reviews. Let's embark on a journey through 5 of these lost treasures. 5 albums that belong on every serious collector's shelf, but remain known only to those fanatics scouring used record stores and online forums for rare finds. Each captures the audacious ethos of 1969, showcasing innovative fusions that subtly but indelibly shaped the genre. The following descriptions are grounded in consolidated analyses from sources like Prog Archives, Rate Your Music, and Period Reviews, ensuring factual accuracy. The first album demanding urgent attention is Andromeda by Andromeda, a British power trio that existed briefly but left a legacy far beyond its lifespan. Formed in 1968 in London, Andromeda comprised musicians rooted in psychedelia and hard rock, technically sharp and uninterested in pop rock conventions. Guitarist and vocalist John Ducan, later of Atomic Rooster, brought a ferocious approach to the guitar, influenced by Hendrix and Cream. Bassist Mick Hawksworth, with experience in groups like the Nashville Teens, treated his instrument as an independent melodic force, anchoring heavy riffs with subtle jazz-inflected lines. Drummer Ian McLean, the youngest, internalized the rhythmic complexity of Ginger Baker and Mitch Mitchell, crafting patterns in irregular meters that challenged casual listeners. This minimalist lineup, without a fixed keyboardist, forced innovation, resulting in a raw, potent sound that foreshadowed proto-metal, as noted in Prog Archives reviews. Released in September 1969 by RCA, Andromeda opens with Too Old, a 4:45-minute proto-prog anthem that sets the band's sonic territory. There's no pandering here. The track erupts with a distorted guitar riff in mid-tempo, over which Ducan weaves angular solos drawn more from jazz improvisation than blues standards. When the bass kicks in after a drum build-up, it delivers a polyrhythmic groove that feels chaotic yet structured, moving through distinct sections, from heavy verses to instrumental bridges laced with feedback. The song blends themes of youthful alienation with unexpected harmonic progressions, rare for 1969 rock. Next, Day of the Change explores acoustic electric dynamics, starting with clean arpeggios before exploding into a wall of sound with layered guitars, evoking the shift from psychedelic folk to hard rock. What makes Andromeda truly special is how it injects raw emotion into complex structures. Return to Sanity, at 8:20 minutes, begins as a mid-tempo piece with Ducan's whispered vocals over fingerstyle bass lines, building to an orchestral crescendo via guitar overdubs that create ethereal textures. This dramatic dynamic echoes early Pink Floyd explorations, but with a rhythmic sophistication that prefigures 1970s jazz rock. Turns to Dust, a 6:50-minute gem, blends hints of Eastern music with modal scales, featuring guitar solos with microtonal bends for a futuristic sound. The title track, at 7 minutes, is an instrumental tour de force, split into parts: a modal intro, a central improvisation, and a riff-driven resolution, using primitive tape loops for spatial effects. The Reason, at 3:30 minutes, adds layered vocal harmonies inspired by Crosby, Stills, and Nash but distorted with fuzz, while I Can Stop the World, at 2:20 minutes, closes with a heavy jam that feels like a collision between Cream and early Black Sabbath. Side B includes When to Stop, 6:50 minutes, an extension of Turns to Dust with more improvisation, and See Into the Stars, 7:15 minutes, an epic with thematic variations. The production was modest, recorded in London studios on 4-track setups in under a month, forcing creative overdubbing that yielded an organic, visceral sound without excessive polish, as noted on Rate Your Music. Influences span British psychedelia to hard blues, with jazz touches and drum breaks. Andromeda's obscurity stems from frustrating factors. RCA, focused on pop acts, invested little in promotion, and the release coincided with Woodstock's media frenzy. The trio refused radio-friendly singles, prioritizing integrity, a noble but commercially fatal choice. Initial sales estimates suggest a few thousand copies before discontinuation. The band split in 1970, with Ducan joining Atomic Rooster and Hawksworth moving to Fuzzy Duck. Today, reissues by Gerson include alternate mixes by Ducan, revealing unreleased takes like an extended The Reason. Decades later, the album influenced British heavy rock, its proto-prog echoes in Budgie and Iron Maiden, particularly through Ducan, as discussed on Prog Archives. Original copies fetch up to $500 at auctions, coveted by collectors who see it as a bridge between 1969 and the NWOBHM. The second album to rediscover is The World of Oz by The World of Oz, a British quartet whose name evoked L. Frank Baum's whimsy, but delivered a dense psychedelic sound far from light. Formed in January 1968 in Birmingham from the ashes of local R&B groups, they had an epiphany after Soft Machine gigs, seeing rock as a vehicle for genuine exploration. The core lineup was Chris Evans, guitar, piano, vocals, aka Christopher Robin. Tony Clarkson, bass, vocals, David Ray, drums, and David Kubinek, organ, aka Kubi. Evans brought lyrics inspired by twisted children's literature, while Kubinek, with classical roots, mastered swirling organ textures. Released in February 1969 by Deram, The World of Oz is darker than typical psych pop, favoring claustrophobic sounds with distorted organs, fuzz guitars, and vocals echoing like old radio transmissions. Its dense vibe foreshadows the unease of Van der Graaf generator in the 1970s. Produced in Birmingham studios, it used natural reverb for a cavernous atmosphere. The opener, The Muffin Man, 238 minutes, is a mini psych narrative with interconnected sections. Lush mellotron mimicking strings at the start, stripping down to solo acoustic guitar for a narrative fall. It uses 6/8 time for a buoyant feel, shifting to irregular meters for decay. Bring the Ring, 302 minutes, follows with mysticism, featuring wailing organ solos via Leslie speakers, a pulsing bass anchoring chaos, and drums with irregular breaks. Jackie, 248 minutes, contrasts with Simon & Garfunkel-esque harmonies fuzzed up. Beside the Fire, 347 minutes, evokes narrative folk. The Humgum Tree, 220 minutes, adds guest flutes for texture, with a little help, 315 minutes, nods to the Beatles with a psych twist. We've All Seen the Queen, 254 minutes, is dark with lyrics about illusions. King Crisis, 310 minutes, epic in vibe despite its brevity, bolsters storytelling, and Mandy Ann, $3 minutes, closes with a light jam. Kubinek treated the Hammond organ like a proto-synthesizer, tweaking drawbars for alien sounds, foreshadowing Emerson's techniques. Influences include emerging krautrock and Soft Machines jazz rock. Controlled feedback experiments add tension. Its obscurity came from Deram's absorption by Decca shortly after release, slashing support for non-selling psych acts. Initial sales estimates suggest a few hundred copies. The band dissolved by late 1969. Evans became a producer, Kubinek a teacher. Its dark emotional intensity prefigures Van der Graaf generator. 2015 reissues sparked a cult following, echoing in bands like Black Midi. The third essential album is Mercator Projected by East of Eden, a Bristol-based British band operating outside the mainstream London or San Francisco scenes. While Jefferson Airplane and Grateful Dead packed the Fillmore, East of Eden played pubs and small festivals, drawing crowds open to unconventional sounds without danceable grooves. Formed in 1967 by musicians with jazz and folk backgrounds, they met in Bristol's academic circles. The lineup was unique. Dave Arbus, violin, flute, saxophones, Ron Keynes, saxophone vocals, Jeff Nicholson, guitar vocals, Andy Snedden, bass, and Jeff Britton, drums, later of Wings. With no dominant guitarist, Arbus's violin-filled textures creating a full cerebral sound. Released in April 1969 by Deram, Mercator Projected captivates with its jazz prog fusion, influenced by Miles Davis's modal jazz filtered through high-volume rock. Northern Hemisphere, 503 minutes, opens with colliding sax and violin in contrapuntal dialogues backed by flexible, powerful drums. Isadora, 433 minutes, feels like a blend of Davis's quintet and Cream, with Arbus's violin mimicking guitar. Waterways, 650 minutes, explores modal scales with pentatonic improvisation and a riff-driven close. Centaur Woman, 710 minutes, with Keynes's vocals, employs contemporary music-inspired dissonances. Bathers, 5 minutes, uses infinite echoes via delays. Communion, 405 minutes, offers calm vocal harmonies before explosive bursts. Moth, 403 minutes, features irregular rhythms, and In the Stable of the Sphinx, 820 minutes, closes with an 8-minute jam. Its compositional maturity shines, structured pieces with room for improvisation, meticulously rehearsed for mathematical precision with human warmth. Recorded in Bristol home studios, it incorporates ambient city sounds. Influences include Terry Riley's minimalism and the Nice's instrumental rock. The electric violin is innovative. Its obscurity stems from Deram's weak distribution. Rolling Stone praised it as visionary, but it lacked national reach. Regional tours were frustrated by imposed set lists. The band split in 1970. Arbus joined the Waterboys, Britain Wings. Its polyrhythms echo in rush and math rock like Don Caballero per Prog Archive's stylistic analyses. The fourth album is Arzakel by Arzakel, a pseudonym for Uriel, emerging from London's psych scene with prog intensity. Formed in 1969 by Egg and Gong musicians to dodge contracts. Steve Hillage, guitar, vocals, aka Simeon Sarsaparilla. Dave Stewart, keyboards, aka Basil Dowling. Mont Campbell, bass vocals, aka Njoroge Gatagaka. And Clive Brooks, drums, aka Basil Brooks. Young but ambitious with jazz and classical roots. Released in June 1969 by Evolution, around 1,000 initial copies, it bridges heavy psych and prog with fuzz guitars, swirling organs, and chaotic rhythms. Its raw production from quick sessions captures live energy. Garden of Earthly Delights, 2:45 minutes, is accessible with Eastern-tinged riffs turning dissonant. Azathoth, 4:20 minutes, showcases Stewart's organ in Bach-inspired overdrive modulations, with Hillage's feedback. Queen Saint Gang, 4:25 minutes, is mythological with dual vocals. Leg, 5:40 minutes, has drum breaks. Clean Innocent Fun, 10:23 minutes, shifts from blues to psych jam. And Metempsychosis, 16:51 minutes, is abstract with tape effects. Its psych structural fusion uses phase shifting for innovative soundscapes. Influences include Soft Machine and Pink Floyd. Its aggression sets it apart. Lacking pop singles, it targeted dedicated listeners. Its obscurity came from limited pressing. The band dissolved soon after, with members joining Egg and Gong. 1990s reissues brought recognition. Hillage's later work influenced space rock like Ozric Tentacles. The fifth and final album is Sea Shanties by High Tide, blending prog with heavy psych in a proto-metal vein. Formed in 1969 in London, Tony Hill, guitar vocals, Simon House, violin keyboards, Peter Pavley, bass, and Roger Haddon, drums. Seasoned underground players. Released in October 1969 by Liberty. It's dense with heavy guitars and textured electric violin. Its raw production captures ferocity. Feudalist's Lament, 5:17 minutes, opens with screeching violin over riffs with complex sections. Death Warmed Up, 9:08 minutes, is a dynamic jam. Pushed but Not Forgotten, 4:45 minutes, has ironic humor in irregular rhythms. Walking Down Their Outlook, 4:58 minutes, is existential with Hendrix-like violin solos. Missing Out, 9:40 minutes, is a heavy improv. And Nowhere, 5:55 minutes, closes with a doom-laden dirge. Its violin rock innovation prefigures Crimson and Curved Air. Obscure due to poor distribution, it dissolved quickly. It gained cult status in the 1980s, a precursor to stoner doom, echoing in Cuse, as noted in Decibel magazine. These 5 albums embody 1969's boldness, forging prog on the margins. Today, digital platforms rediscover them, proving innovation thrives in the mainstream's shadow.